Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. I'm your host, Ashwin. I'm joined by a very special guest this week. I have James from the Cricket Badger Podcast. James has been on the show before. We've partnered, we collaborated over the years. James, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. As I was saying just before we pressed go live there, you've waited until the day that India beat England to invite me on, but it's good to see you.
We're very strategic with our guests, and I would like the listeners to know, for the record, that I invited James to come on after India had been rolled out for 229 before England had started batting, or maybe like the first over of England's batting innings. So at that point, it looked like it could have been England's game.
I still thought, even at that stage, that England were going to struggle because England's batting has been woeful in this tournament so far. So against India's bowling attack, which, well, you know only too well, with the likes of Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, Siraj, etc., it's never easy to get big runs against them. And even a relatively kind of mediocre total was always potentially going to cause England problems, I think, today.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. And so while we have you later in the show, we'll try to cover a little bit about other games that happened this week. We finally saw our first couple of close games of this World Cup, which was a little crazy that it took us as long as it did. But let's start with the match that just wrapped up. And so as we sit here, India is top of the table, undefeated in their home World Cup. England, unfortunately, bottom of the table, and lots to ask about that. But let's start with the game today, kind of overall. So James Buttler did say at the post-match presentation, he did say, we would have taken 229 going into the innings break. It sounds like from how you watched it, you still felt like it was maybe a little too many. How do you feel about India's kind of batting innings overall?
Rohit Sharma is one of my favourite players. He's always fantastic. His innings probably was the difference between the two sides today, because I think it just took India to a total where England, if they lost early wickets, were going to be struggling. And England have tended to lose early wickets in this tournament. So, as I say, I didn't think it was going to be an easy chase for England at all. I thought they'd probably make a better fist of it than they did do. I thought India's batting. I mean, if there's going to be a criticism of India, and it's hard to criticise a side that's 100% and flying in this World Cup, playing in home conditions, their tail is a little bit long. And we've seen in the past with India that if their top order misses out, which is a rarity, usually you can rely on Rohit or Virat or somebody to step up and score runs. When you get down to 8, 9, 10, 11, there's not a huge amount of batting there. And Surya Kumar Yadav was left with the task of trying to try and get up to 260 or something like that with the tail, which was always going to be difficult. So, that might come back to bite India, the fact that, 8, 9, 10, 11 aren't necessarily that handy with the bat. But just generally speaking, India were under pressure at times, but they managed to get enough partnerships together to get themselves up to a score which they could defend.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be transparent, it's the biggest debate we have had on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, which is, I think you're being generous when you say there's not a lot to work with. I think the reality is we have 4 number 11s, that period, right? And so the biggest issue, we have phenomenal batters, phenomenal bowlers. It's just that balance, and it gets exacerbated exponentially without Hardik Pandya, right? Because he's that sort of glue that can be your 6th bowling option and still bat at a number 5 or 6.
The trouble as well, Ashwin, is that when you go through a tournament, which India have been doing, where it's been pretty much plain sailing, Rohit's been scoring runs, Virat's got centuries, and you don't necessarily expose that lower order. Even Jadeja, at number 7, who's a tremendous player. We've seen him in the IPL smacking sixes left, right, and centre, but he hasn't had a lot of time in the middle. So the danger is that you can get yourself to the semi-finals where it's a one-off and you can be eliminated. And if you 2019, New Zealand take a load of top order wickets, and all of a sudden you're fighting back from a poor start. So it might come back to bite India if they carry on playing like they are doing. It's unlikely because Rohit Sharma's been glorious, hasn't he?
Yeah, let's run down that really quickly. I mean, if you're an England fan, I'm an India fan. If you're an England fan, you're sitting there at about the 12 over mark, I think it was, at 40 for 3, right? Gill's gone. Kohli's gone for a duck, which is a whole different debate for Kohli and chases versus Kohli setting targets. And then Shreyas Iyer, I mean, just short ball. It doesn't take a lot of strategic thinking to get Shreyas Iyer out anymore. You just bowl the short ball. So at 40 for 3, yes, you have Rohit at the crease. Yes, you have Rahul at the crease. But you're thinking, England's thinking they can try to move really quickly and go for blood, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're looking at the lineup and you're thinking another couple of wickets here, and you could maybe even roll them for kind of 100,
Mm-hmm.
120. Because, if Rowett goes, Rowett's their talisman, he's their form man in this tournament. He's so consistent,
Mm-hmm.
and he's playing that aggressive brand of cricket. Anything remotely short gets deposited over deep square for six. He's so good at finding the gaps in the field in that power play in the opening 10 overs. So he's crucial, and that's another thing as well. You get to the elimination matches at the end. If he fails, and then all of a sudden, do the team start looking around and thinking, "Oh, blimey, Rowett's out. It's all on us," kind of thing. But from England's perspective, at 40 for three, you're thinking, can they just take another couple here? Get down to Jadeja too early, because you're looking, from India's point of view, you're looking at Jadeja coming in with 15 overs to go max for him to hit for home. You're not looking for him to be in there in the first 20, certainly. So there was a chance there for England to really break the door open, but Rowett and KL Rahul formed that partnership and just gradually took it away a little bit.
Yeah, and as I kind of look back at the game, that was sort of the difference in approach, right? And it's very easy to say this in hindsight. So we'll take that as armchair critics. I said we get the benefit of doing this, but at 40 for three, Rohit slowed down. He consolidated. He said he sort of seemed to assess this pitch doesn't have a lot of runs in it. Rahul is the captain of the Lucknow IPL team, so he knows that they consolidated, built a partnership. Yes, we would have hoped for a little bit more of a flourish at the end to get the runs, but it seemed like, and I will come to England's batting, but it seemed like England's approach was we need to hit our way out of trouble, and you saw that particularly with Stokes.
I think that's the danger with England at the moment, because in Test cricket, they've kind of chosen that option to basically be on the front foot. Doesn't always mean, though, in Test cricket, I think people misunderstand Bazball sometimes, because I think Bazball is taking the more positive option in whatever situation you're in, but it's reading the match situation as well. And if all of a sudden a fine bowler suddenly starts bowling really well at you, you soak up that pressure and then decide when to go hard again to put that pressure back on the bowler. They've been trying to do that in this Cricket World Cup, I think, with the bat, and they haven't been able to execute it because they've got so many players out of form. They're not really reading the match situation. They're not reading the surfaces. They seem to be playing from a computer kind of program in terms of stats and in terms of analytics, and not actually with gut feel and with their own eyes at times. And I think, we've all played cricket to various standards. You can kind of do all the analytics you like, but if you look down at the pitch and you think, well, maybe this is a 250 pitch, not necessarily a 350 pitch, you've got to play accordingly, haven't you? And I think after seeing India bat, England's net run rate was never going to be something to make up today. It was all about beating India, keeping England, even if it was a remote hope in the competition. So it wasn't really a case of trying to knock these runs off in 30 overs and boost the net run rate. But I think when wickets fall, that's when you just need to put your foot on the ball, just take a breath, play the match situation, take the next 5 overs maybe a little bit more steadily. Doesn't mean you're not going to put the 4 ball away if it comes, but be a little bit more clever. Play clever cricket, play match situation cricket. Rowett did that. KL Rahul did that. England didn't.
Even Suryakumar Yadav, by the way, who's a T20 player, watching him bat at 104 strike rate it's the most unnatural type of game for him. But he knew he had to, we got a comment in on YouTube as well from Randomly Systematic that said, I think the India tail did the sensible thing by trying to play out the 50 overs. And that's kind of ODI cricket 101, right? If you're starting to collapse, at least try to get through all 50. And
it was about allowing Suryakumar Yadav to try and, he didn't quite get there, did he? He got out before the end, but his plan was to try and steer the tail to maybe over number 47 or something like that. Then in the last 3, maybe just kind of launch an assault to try and boost that score up to a slightly better total than they ended up with. But so his thought process was right. He just got out at the wrong time.
Yeah. So before I get to the Indian bowling and today's match more, let me ask you kind of a broader question, right? So as I look at the points table, I think at the top you have teams led by Rohit, who's been arguably very good this World Cup, Bavuma, Tom Latham, right? And then right now in 4th is Australia, which I wanted to ask you in the second half of the show. But at the bottom, or kind of middle bottom, you have Babar Azam. I would say Scott Edwards for Netherlands is, with 2 wins, has punched above his weight, even though it's near the bottom of the table. And so I want to ask you about your family namesake and specifically James Buttler, right? What
I think,
just the skipper, not the batter. What
yeah, I think
has he left a lot to be desired?
obviously T20 world champions only a year ago.
Mhm.
He lifted the trophy there. I just wonder with Joss. I kind of look at his body language, and I think he tells a lot. His heart on his sleeve, and that can be down as well as up. And I think he's walking around like a kind of almost like a dead man walking at the moment. He looks somber. He looks down. It reminds me of his last few Test matches where it wasn't going his way, and I think he felt the writing was on the wall for his Test career, and he was right. And I think at the moment he's walking around with this England team looking dour and somber and downcast. And I don't think that's what a captain should be. Your captain is supposed to get underneath the team and lift them and be maybe smiling when the rest are frowning and trying to not laughing it off and not misunderstanding the seriousness of the situation, but being somebody. I mean, Ben Stokes is a good example of that.
Yep.
He walked into a Test team for England that Joe Root had lost. What was it? Loads of Test matches in a row.
Yeah.
16 out of 17. Only one win in 17, wasn't it? And so the team was down. Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes, but I think largely Ben Stokes came in and said, "Right, we're gonna change this. We're gonna be aggressive. We're gonna go out there and play our brand of cricket. We're gonna trust you guys. You're not going to be dropped next match if you fail." And he lifted them up and took them on. I'm not sure Joss Buttler does that as a captain. I don't know him. I've never met him, so I don't know what he's like, kind of behind the scenes. And I get the impression he's a really nice guy. But I don't think he's necessarily a captain of a team that's struggling. Most people can captain a team that is doing well. And I think he made some good decisions in that T20 World Cup. But it's easy to do them when you're winning and things are going your way. When things are not going your way, and obviously this World Cup has not gone Joss Buttler or England's way, it's harder to actually then. That's when your mettle is tested as a captain. Some people can come through that and kind of break through that barrier and get them back on an even keel. Joss Buttler seems to be struggling.
Yeah, and let me link to that because you brought up the T20 World Cup and the fact that England are champions. If my memory serves me right, I'm pretty sure Joss Buttler was the only, maybe other than Alex Hales, was the only real prolific run scorer for England in that World Cup. So how much is Buttler's own performance on the field tied to his ability to motivate his troops?
And he's batting badly, isn't he?
Yeah.
We all seen Joss Buttler at his best, which is much of his career in white ball cricket, is one of the most sought after players in all of the T20 franchise leagues, including the IPL. And he is up there with anybody you can talk about. He can play the kind of innings that Glenn Maxwell played. He can play the kind of innings that Rohit Sharma played. He can play all kinds of white ball cricket. He's a very clever player. In this World Cup, he has been a long way short of that in terms of his batting standard, and it does rub off because you are as a keeper as well. I think as captain and then as a batter, you want all of your disciplines to kind of be rubbing off on each other to kind of just create that kind of groundswell of positivity and have the ball rolling in the right direction. I always think with Joss Buttler, it's tough to captain a white ball side. You've got to stay on top of it. Your field placings, your bowling changes, all the rest of it. He does a lot of that well, but there are instances when the ball's coming back in from the deep where he drops it as it comes in, and you're thinking, well, his mind's not on that catch. His mind's on the next ball. So it's difficult. I mean, you mentioned Scott Edwards. He's been great. And Netherlands playing greater than some of their parts. Yeah. You get the impression that Netherlands are very keen on analytics and on matchups and all of these kind of funky things to try and get people out. But it's working for them. But they're playing as a team, and they've come into this maybe obviously with slightly lesser aspirations than England. They've probably achieved their goal already with 2 wins, and if they can pick up a third, that'd be a fantastic Cricket World Cup for them.
Yeah.
But Scott Edwards has always been on top of his field placings. He's been on top of his bowlers. He's batted well. He's getting plaudits. The confidence is high. You take that into the next game, and you're automatically thinking positively and thinking proactively as a captain. For Joss, I think it's a downward spiral at the minute. He's thinking negatively. They're getting negative feedback. So you're taking negativity into a match, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, let's talk then quickly about the chase today, right, or the lack thereof, if you will. But Joss has been dismissed 3 times so far, chasing that ball on 4th, 5th stump line, edge to the keeper. Right, wasn't a surprise. You expected Bumrah and Shami, who I'll come back to in a second, but Kuldeep, right? That kind of the dangerous amount of spin on the ball. I mean, you almost don't really blame him for the dismissal today, because it was that side spin we haven't seen from Kuldeep since he kind of sped up his average deliveries a little bit, and just a peach today, right? You give him a little bit of slack today for a great ball.
Yeah, and everybody gets out. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned Virat Kohli getting a
Yeah.
duck.
Yeah.
He's been in tremendous form in this Cricket World Cup. Everybody gets a ball that they either make a mistake to, or is just too good for them at times.
Yeah.
So you can forgive anybody getting out cheaply. But I think there's just a bit of a tendency, not just with Joss, but with all of the England batting. David Milan's 140 seems like a long time ago now.
Mm-hmm.
The England batting has just been below standard. Joe Root, who I've got a huge amount of respect for, Johnny Bairstow, the same. At their very best, they are some of the best batters in the world in the white ball game, and they've just not brought their A game to this Cricket World Cup. They're a long, long way short. So,
Yeah.
and that kind of malaise, if you're in a downward spiral with your batting, you kind of see more fielders in the field than there are.
Yeah.
The gaps are smaller. You maybe make clouded decisions in terms of what shots you take on. It doesn't help, does it? Whereas
And
when you're playing really well,
Mhm.
there's clarity of thought
Yeah.
and everything's working.
It always feels like there's fewer fielders and the one extra second of time when you're playing well. So let me,
Absolutely.
without belaboring it all too much, let me. So when I watch the games, I'm in the U.S. My time zone isn't great, unfortunately. So I watch as much of the first innings as I can. I power nap during the innings break. So that's the beauty of the 30-minute innings break. And then I wake up to watch the second. And I was sort of half awake and starting to watch the boundaries start to flow. Couple from Bairstow, a couple from Milan, including the 6. And then England had sort of raced to 30 for 0 in 4 overs. And I'm thinking that they're going to make easy work of this. And then come on the quick bowling pair of Bumrah and Shami. What is it that Bumrah and Shami did, you think, today that, Willie and Wood who had Wokes had a good decent day, but what did the Indian bowlers do better, the quicks?
I mean, one thing with the Indian bowlers is they know the surfaces, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
They know how to bowl in India, so that's a major advantage. That's one of the great things of home advantage, isn't it? You know how to play at home. Yeah. But I mean, Bumrah and Shami are just two very experienced, quality exponents of their art. Different bowlers, obviously. Jasprit Bumrah at his very best, I think, is as good as anybody in the world across all 3 formats. But in ODI cricket, he's got the test skills of being able to actually have that skill on the ball, but the T20 skills of the variations as well. He's got tremendous variations. He can get swing early on. He is absolute quality. And anybody, I don't care which team it is, are going to struggle against a Jasprit Bumrah and a Mohammad Shami running in, bowling as well as they did today. And obviously on that Lucknow pitch was maybe a little bit too paced at times, I felt. And, it wasn't a 400 track by any means. It was probably a 250 track as a par score. So you do have to maybe work a bit harder for the runs. England, I think, have done quite well of getting out the traps most times with a few boundaries. But the wheels, when they start to come off quite quickly for England in this tournament.
Yeah, you can say that again. I mean, that's happened a few times. Let me ask you then, similarly, Joe Root got a good ball. I mean, not the greatest foot positioning, honestly. You saw him go across the line, which you never really see from him. Let me just ask you about Ben Stokes then. What was that, just impatience? Was he saying, I've done it in Bazball? And is it just one of those strategies that when it works, he's great, but you kind of know that when it doesn't pay off, it's going to make you look silly?
I mean, that's been England's kind of strategy in one-day cricket for a long time. Owen Morgan, people forget the failures under Owen Morgan, and there weren't that many, but they were playing this positive attacking brand of cricket where they were going to take it to the opposition. We're going to score basically 50 more than you score. If we score 450, doesn't matter if you get 400, we're still going to beat you. And there were some days where they fell flat on their face in the preparation for that 2019 World Cup. Not everything was all singing, all dancing, and they lost 2 or 3 matches in the group stage. So the last part of the 2019 group stage was knockout cricket for England through to the semi-finals. But there is this thing with England, and Ben Stokes is kind of the epitome of that, really, in that they. We kind of just mentioned Bazball earlier in Test cricket. They want to try and get back at the bowlers, rather than be the batter under pressure, they want to put the bowlers under pressure and give the bowlers a little bit to think about and not allow them to settle into their stride. If you're going to take that approach, you are going to get it wrong some days. and you're going to attack the wrong ball, or you're going to execute the attacking shot slightly wrongly. And obviously, yeah, for today, Ben did. I mean, just on Ben Stokes, I love him to bits as a cricketer. He's an incredible player. He's been at the very heart of England's success over the last 4 years in white ball cricket, and obviously at the heart of most of England's success in the Test arena. I didn't necessarily think it was the right thing to do to take him to this Cricket World Cup and to ask him to go. He'd retired from the format. He'd been playing other players in the meantime. He's obviously a tremendous player, but is it the right thing to do to suddenly just bring somebody in from the sidelines and say, "Come back in because we need you"? It did smack a little bit of desperation, clouded thinking. There was that little bit of, shall we take Harry Brook? Shall we not take Harry Brook? And now they've taken him. They've got one of the best young players in the world. Just watching from the dugout, in my opinion, if you take him, you should play him. So I don't think the clarity has been there at all for England.
Yeah. So
since winning.
So that's a good question for me here now. Now you're sitting here, you're England's, support staff's management, selectors, captain, Butler, etc. You got 3 games to go, one of which is against Australia, who we'll talk about are resurging. Then the Netherlands, who actually look like they could be a very real threat, and wrapping up with Pakistan. There's mathematically still a chance to qualify, which is... So you're assuming that. So what do you do from here? Do you bring a Brook back in? Do you bring in the Sam Curran, who hasn't got a look? Gus Atkinson traveled with the squad, hasn't really got much of a look. He played a couple games. So what do you do from here? Do you try to get to mid-table and revive some pride? Do you try to use this as an opportunity to say, okay, it was bad, we'll reset? What do you do strategically?
I think England just needs a complete reset.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the players that they've got out there. The majority of, I think all of the team that played today and in the last game are over 30. You scroll on 4 years. Are they going to be available still? Are they still going to be at their very best in 4 years' time? They've got to make a judgment on some of those. They need to sit down and probably talk to those players. I think David Millan's 36. Is he still going to be playing cricket at 40? Probably not. Is he going to be England's best option when he's 40? Probably not. So there's a few conversations to be had. The likes of Bairstow, Root, etc. Are you going to be committed to the next 4-year cycle of ODI cricket? If you're not, then we need to look elsewhere. So the future of England's ODI cricket probably in many instances lies away from the 11 that play today or the squad that's out there. Gus Atkinson is an interesting one because he'd only played, I think, a couple of List A games before he got selected by England. He'd made his name in the 100, bowling sets of 5 balls, taking wickets, bowling quickly. That doesn't prepare you for bowling in 50 over cricket. You need that experience behind you of building up a spell. You don't build up spells in T20 in the 100. You kind of have your bag of tricks. You just hope it comes off for you. You take a few wickets and you walk off the pitch after bowling only a handful of balls. You've potentially got 60 balls to bowl in an ODI in maybe 2 or 3 spells. There's a whole different challenge there for a bowler. But if they've identified him as being somebody for the future, play him in the next 3, get him some experience, make him, hopefully get some success, so that in 4 years' time he can possibly even lead this attack and get that trophy back.
Yeah, and Sam Curran's still 25, right? So he may be somebody.
Sam Curran infuriates the hell out of me, I have to say, because there's some days you watch Sam Curran play. Yeah. And he's a world beater. He's fantastic. Batting and bowling, he looks absolutely brilliant. In the last T20 World Cup, he was the player of the tournament. There's other days it looks like some kids won a ticket to play for England, and he's so far off the pace. It's unreal. He got the big price tag at the IPL and didn't particularly deliver on that in the IPL. And I think if Sam Curran really wants to kick on and be a star for England, he needs to. I'm gonna say add some kind of tricks to his strings to his bow, but he just needs more consistency. Because when he's ordinary, he's very ordinary. When he's good, he's brilliant. But there's few and far between, and consistency is important. If you're playing at the top level, you can't just be off it one day and on it the next. You've got to, if you're wearing an England shirt, you've got to deliver pretty much all the time, haven't you? So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. There's not that many young players in that squad to actually really blood. Everybody's had a go and to a large extent failed.
And then even beyond the squad, then, as I look from the outside, other than the 2019 World Cup, it really feels like England is gearing shorter format, T20, 100, whatever you want to call it, and then Test cricket. right? Is there sort of the middle getting squeezed out with not a lot of young players wanting to be ODI experts?
I could give you a 3-hour answer on this. I'll try and keep it more succinct, but
Yeah.
I think after they won the 2019 World Cup, they rightly took the plaudits. And I think it's important to say that a lot of the players that are playing in this team, they've underperformed massively in this Cricket World Cup, but England fans have a huge, it shouldn't be too hard on them. They've got a huge amount of things to thank them for, because they brought the 2019 World Cup, they brought the T20. So they've done a huge amount of good for English cricket. They've just had a bad few weeks in India. But I think after 2019, there was obviously they accepted the plaudits, awards and the glitz and glamour. And then it just seemed to take their eye off the ball. 50 over cricket was no longer important. The 100 came in. 50 over cricket in England domestically is now almost a second 11 tournament played underneath the 100. Yeah, you're not necessarily giving youngsters. I mean, like I said, Gus Atkinson's hardly played a List A game because he's playing the 100 instead of 50 over because it's at the same time. But they didn't really, in terms of the ODIs they've played in the run up to this tournament, that wasn't proper preparation. I did a tweet the other day. There's that quote which is fail to prepare to fail. And England just have not prepared in any way. In the 4 years from the disappointment in 2015 to the 2019 success, Owen Morgan got that by the scruff of the neck. They made a plan. They stuck to the plan. They became the best side in the world, and they won the World Cup. In the 4 years since 2019, they've done none of that. They've kind of almost been arrogant, complacent, sat back, thought, we've got the players still, we can just rock up and we're going to be okay. I saw Rob Key do an interview with Sky Sports News the other day, saying that if they'd had their way, they could have come to England earlier, to India earlier to prepare, but they had to play cricket in England. They had to play an island series, a 3 ODI island series, where none of this current side were playing in. It's a complete waste of time. Well, it was almost insulting to Ireland that it was the England Lions playing Ireland. None of those players got on the plane to go to India. So why didn't they send a couple of coaches out with that team earlier? If that was Rob Key, thinking that was the best preparation, we'll send them out earlier and get some practice matches in. That you all play the proper team against Ireland. Because the Ireland, it was basically gift wrapping some caps to a few people that aren't quite ready for them yet in some cases. But that England Lions team that played against Ireland contained some interesting names. Rian Ahmed, Leicestershire spinning all-rounder, Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, some proven test players that maybe have a future for England in ODIs. Sam Hain, who has got an incredible List A record for Warwickshire, has been largely ignored by England in terms of ODI cricket or T20 cricket. He surely gets a bit of a run now, to a chance to prove himself at the top deck. So there's a number of players, I think, that are bubbling under for England who they need to start taking 50 over cricket seriously. They need to get some proper ODIs in. 4 years' time, they need to use that 12 months, 24 months ahead of that next World Cup to prepare properly for it and to actually play the proper team. Because even when they toured Bangladesh, I think only James Buttler was part of that team. That was largely a Lions setup as well. They only got close to playing their full strength team in the 5-match series against New Zealand in England in the summer. And that was obviously in English conditions. Did we really learn anything that we didn't know already? I'm not sure we did.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think as much as I would love to continue talking about Team England and the phenomenal win for Team India today, we should move on. And I want to talk a little bit more. But congratulations to all our Indian fans and to Team India. Outstanding win, and commiserations with Team England. A lot of soul searching to do. A lot of work ahead.
India will win this Cricket World Cup unless India beats itself.
Yep. That's it. I think you've said that well. Let me ask you from an Indian team perspective, what do you do with the quick bowlers? Because Shami was left on the sidelines, rightly so. I think Siraj had the form going in as the second quick. You don't touch Bumrah. And then he came in and picked up a 5 for and a 4 for. And his, they tell cricketers, make sure you're banging the walls down when you get the opportunity. And boy, has he done that. So what do you do if you're selecting India's 11?
I mean, one of the things, just before I answer that, 15 people in that team, all of them would get into every other side in the tournament. You got Ishan Kishan, Surya Kumar Yadav's been in that dugout. R. Ashwin, Got
Yeah.
a bowler, and
Yeah.
he's sitting watching
Yeah.
from the sidelines. So
Yeah.
they would walk into any other side in the tournament. And Mohammed Shami is no different. I love Siraj as a bowler. They've got kind of different kind of styles and mindsets, haven't they? Siraj is up and at them, trying to get wickets. Shami is consistent. Bumrah's got all of his tricks. They've all got a place in an India side, I think. It's going to be interesting to see how. I'll tell you what's going to be interesting. Will they? You asked me about England's next 3 games. India are pretty much qualified now, aren't they? It's really just a case of jockeying for position for who you play in the semi-final. So there is a temptation to maybe rest a few people and to make sure that they're ready for the semi-finals. I don't like that strategy. I'd prefer to keep a winning team together and to keep that ball rolling into the semis so that you just basically hit the ground running in the last 4 and take it through to the trophy. If you start to bring an Ishan Kishan in for a Rohit Sharma to give him a couple of games off, you rest a Virat Kohli, you rest a Jasprit Bumrah, and then you lose a couple.
Yeah.
Not only have you lost a couple, but then you have got some very important players that have been sitting in the sidelines for a while who have lost the form and haven't played as much. So I think for India, if I was in charge of India, I'd keep them, keep that A team together and just say, win the next 5. Let's lift this World Cup. Let's go through with a 100% record and let's do it in style.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I think no question about Virat, Rohit, Bumrah, Kuldeep. None of those names get dropped for me. For me, the question becomes, okay, second seamer. Rohit seems to like to play 3 seamers. And exactly the point you opened with, which was we have 4 number 11s. That stays the same. Now, I would have traded the 20-odd runs that Shardul gets you at number 8 for the 4 wickets Shami got you any day of the week. I think right call. But I think that's the tinkering they potentially do. Shreyas has looked a little scrappy, especially against a team with good quicks who can bowl a short ball. Maybe you bring in an Ishan there to bring in a lefty option and a better player of the short ball. Maybe as Hardik starts to come back, you push Surya Kumar up to 4, or you push Rahul up to 4, play him at 5. Those are the potential things you tinker with in the next 3 games, not the fundamentals.
I like Shardul, Neil, who comes on my podcast, we've been talking about the Indian side. He was saying that you play Shardul Thakur hoping you don't use him, but he's there if you need him.
Yeah,
he's kind of like a backup. He's a little bit like what's his face, Mark Chapman in the New Zealand side. Hardly seen him. Hardly seen him at all, but he's there if they ever get down that low. And Shardul Thakur can score you a 50 coming in lower down, can't he? So I can see that. If he comes in at number 8, it does kind of just add an extra barrier before you get through to Jasprit and the rest of them. Jasprit Bumrah can play a little crazy cameo, can't he? But he can also be out first ball.
Yeah, maybe he's a number 10 instead of an 11 is the point. Yeah. He's not an 8, right? I think the only other person potentially is Ashwin. And so on a pitch like today, on a pitch on maybe in Kolkata when they play at the Eden Gardens, that's a potential space to bring in Ash at number 8 because he can bat and get you that 50.
There's not many England cricket fans that can believe that Ashwin doesn't play every single match for India.
Yeah.
I know obviously with Jadeja, you've got a left arm handed bat. He's incredibly explosive, and in one-day cricket, his white ball bowling is brilliant. But in India, on the surfaces you have, I'd play Ashwin alongside Jadeja every day of the week. I think Jadeja at 7, Ashwin at 8, and then whatever from there on. You've got every base covered then.
Yeah, well said. I think good situation for Team India to be in. Let me ask you about some of the other things that happened this week, and we've gone a little over what I said we would go. So thank you for sticking with us. Where we got lots of comments coming in, so people are loving this. As I tried to summarize the week, right? It started with Afghanistan's victory over Pakistan, which I'm not even sure I could call an upset, to be totally honest. And then I tried to summarize. Pakistan lost both their games. Against Afghanistan, and then in the first real close match of the tournament against South Africa, Bangladesh lost both theirs, and then England lost both theirs, as South Africa and Australia won both theirs. Again, one was close, right? But you're starting to see this rift in the points table. So do you see anybody breaching that top 4, or is India, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia set?
I think that's set. It's just who plays who, isn't it? It's who finishes first, second, third, fourth. I can't see anybody. I can't see any of those 4 losing enough games to bring anybody else into it, even if somebody else won all theirs.
So then let me ask you about Australia in particular, right? So coming into the World Cup, they played a 5-match series against South Africa where they went up 2-0 and then lost 3 on the trot. Yeah. And then they lost against India and lost against South Africa. Now, in hindsight, we all started writing them off after the first 2 losses. Oh my gosh, bottom of the table, 0 for 2. But they played what has proven to be the two top teams in the tournament so far.
Yeah.
And now they've won 4 on the trot, including David Warner finding his form, including a a massive total against the New Zealand that they just about managed to defend, but they did defend it. And so are you starting to see a lot of questions in the chat, but are you starting to see Australia reemerge as this threat of being 5-time World Cup champions?
You can never write New Zealand and Australia off in global tournaments, can you? New Zealand always seem to find a way to get at least to the final 4. And Australia, no matter how they've played, always seem to manage to win enough games to be competitive towards the end. I don't think either side wins this, by the way. I think there's some weaknesses still in that Australian side. David Warner's top order runs have masked some slow batting from Labuschagne Smith, etc., in the middle overs. Glenn Maxwell, though, finding form, has kind of then again masked it at the end because they've been really quick to start with. Even against New Zealand, they blasted out the traps, got to nearly 200 for no loss, then lost the openers. Labuschagne Smith stunk up the joint for a while, slowed everything down. And then Maxwell and some of the lower order kind of fired them up to a bigger score. Maxwell's 100 the other day was just awesome. That was one of the best things I've ever seen.
I mean, I looked away and you turned away and you come back and you suddenly he's 30 more runs. It was just the speed with which he got to that century was unbelievable.
And any team that's got somebody that can do that can win matches. Semi-finals, finals. If Maxwell rocks it, if Warner does what he's been doing, if Travis Head plays like he did, and then Maxwell adds that extra bit of pixie dust at the end, and you can rack up 400, you're in a match, aren't you? And anybody, India, New Zealand, South Africa, will be in a fight if that's the case. So you can't rule out Australia. They just know how to navigate a major tournament.
Yeah, well said. I think the last question I wanted to ask you. So as I thought about India and the 5 wins on the trot they had, they were all chasing. A tougher win today, defending a total, but the bowlers showed they could do it. South Africa, on the flip side, had only won while setting these massive totals, so not a great chasing side. Against Pakistan, they managed to get Pakistan all out for 270, and yet they showed, despite some 8 and Markram heroics, they struggle in the chase. And phenomenal finish, right? Keshav Maharaj hits this. It was oddly reminiscent of India versus Pakistan, the T20 match where Nawaz gets the ball, bowls kind of the wide outside the right-hander's left pad going forward. Ashwin in that situation chose to leave it and take the wide, and Maharaj chose to I want to call it sweep, but some sort of a hoik, if you will, and get it to the boundary. But does South Africa start to shake this sort of choker's tag, if you will? It wasn't a must win, but they were almost in a spot where they could have lost it, and they managed to pull that out. How big is that for them psychologically?
Nobody was talking about South Africa really ahead of this tournament, and I actually had them as an outsider for the semi-finals, but they played better than that, really. For me, they are India's biggest threat in this tournament because they. I think they probably benefited from the fact that nobody was talking about them, so they came in without any expectations. And when they get to the semi-finals, because they will be there, they will be in a situation where pretty much everybody in their team has contributed along the way. Whether it's Heinrich Klaassen, whether it's Quinton de Kock, whether it's the bowlers, everybody seems to have kind of put their hand up at some stage for South Africa. So there's going to be a lot of confidence in that camp. Confidence and momentum is huge in one-day cricket. And South Africa have that in absolute, heaps of quantities. They are playing really, really well. So, I hope they don't chop and change. Rabada missed out the other day with a little bit of a niggle. Hopefully he's okay because he's important for them. But South Africa look the real deal. We've seen some big South African teams in the past: AB de Villiers, Lance Cluners, Alan Donalds, etc. And they've always been tipped for the very top. This South African team could have been unheralded, but actually could become the first South African side to win it. Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting point because they are probably a better 11 than they are any superstars, really. I mean, there's some who are Quinton de Kock or Rabada are up there, but they're not AB de Villiers and Alan Donald's level of superstars. I've said for me, as much as an Indian fan, I want to say it's India. I've said for me, we have the best top order, but Markram, Klaassen, Miller is the best 4-5-6, and
It's a powerhouse in the
yeah,
middle order.
it's unbelievable, and that's what wins you. That may win you T20s. It sure as heck wins you ODIs when you're playing.
And then you've
50
got
overs.
Marco Janssen coming in at 7, who can be a bit hit and miss, but on his day can hit some big balls as well. So that 4, 5, 6, 7 for South Africa, if they've got the foundation from the top order, is able to catapult them up to something ridiculous.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so we've heard your prediction. It's going to be the same top 4. It's going to be just a matter of where teams finish. It sounds like you're predicting an India-South Africa final, and then India to go all the way.
As I said, India can only beat themselves.
Yeah.
But it's one-day cricket, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on their day, when it comes right down to it, with the pressure of the final in front of a big home crowd, will Rohit stand up? Will Virat stand up? They have done in the past. There's no reason to doubt them. But you only need a couple of cracking balls from Rabada, and all of a sudden the skids are on, and maybe a bit of doubt creeps in. That's the only thing that can ruin it for India, because for me, they are the best team in the tournament. I said at the start they're 80% likely to win this tournament. I'll probably make it 85% now. But yeah, there are other teams in this tournament. By the time they get to that semi-final, final stage, we'll have bags of confidence. We'll have people in form. And it just needs to go right for them on the day. On one-day cricket, is that what's the slogan of this tournament? It only takes one day. It only take one day to lose it as well, can't it?
That's it. That is very well said. I mean, I think 5th of November, India plays South Africa in the group stage, and that match is going to be very telling. It'll be interesting to see if India wants to chase and South Africa wants to set a total to play to their strengths, or they each want to challenge themselves, and South Africa wants to try to chase and India wants to try to set a big total. James, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for taking the extra time. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you and your show?
At cricket_badger on Twitter. And then you can, if you just put Cricket Badger podcast into Google, it will crop up. You'll find me.
We've both been doing these shows a long time, so I really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to have a chat, even though I'm sure it hasn't been the best day in England or for British fans or English fans as a whole. So
it's cathartic, Ashwin. The chance to get things off my chest.
Yeah. That's the beauty of running these podcasts. This has been the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. I couldn't get to all the comments because it's hard to multitask and read and talk at the same time, but we do read them all after. If you are listening on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if you are listening after the fact, at One Tip, One Hand, we're on all the socials, Twitter or X or whatever it's supposed to be called now, Facebook, Instagram. Send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week to talk about how the race to the semifinals is shaping up. This is the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast with the Cricket Badger. James, thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you.